Okay, so today we're going to dive into something pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Poverty and all the things that go with it.
Right.
We've got this episode from the Hopeton Lifestyle Podcast.
Yeah.
And there are 15 rules of poverty that we're going to unpack.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that poverty is a massive problem. But you know what's really interesting?
That's right.
Is looking at the systems in place, how they kind of perpetuate this cycle. It's like a web, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more than just saying someone's poor, right?
Exactly.
There are all these factors at play.
Totally. And the podcast goes into these rules that really show just how tough it is to break free from poverty.
Yeah, let's get into those. I mean, the first few are all about like the financial strain, right?
Absolutely. It's about more than just living paycheck to paycheck, which we hear a lot.
Right.
It's about the why behind it.
Right.
So like one of the rules is stagnant wages.
Okay.
And Hopeton really hit on how for years wages haven't risen much.
Right.
But everything else has gotten way more expensive.
Yeah, rent, food, healthcare, it's insane.
Exactly. It's like trying to run up a down escalator. You're constantly losing ground.
And that makes saving money basically impossible.
Totally. That's another rule.
Right.
No savings.
So then what happens when like an unexpected expense comes up?
Disaster, right? The podcast gave an example about a single mom.
Oh, yeah.
Had to choose between fixing her car to get to work or buying groceries for her kids. I mean,
Heartbreaking.
it is. And that's the reality for so many.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle. And I bet that takes a toll on your mental health too, right?
Oh, absolutely. The stress, the anxiety of never knowing if you'll make ends meet.
Makes sense.
And the podcast even talked about the shame that comes with being poor.
Oh, yeah, like you feel like you're not good enough.
Yeah, and that's where the social stigma rule comes in.
Okay.
People judge you. They have these preconceived ideas about what it means to be poor.
Oh, yeah.
And it can be isolating.
I bet.
Makes you not want to ask for help.
Absolutely. And what about those born into poverty? I mean, it's even tougher for them, right?
It's that intergenerational poverty idea. Right.
The cycle repeats itself, and the podcast was pretty clear that it really challenges the whole notion of everyone having a fair shot.
It's like you're already behind before you even start.
Imagine growing up with bad schools, limited job options, and no one around you who's ever really made it out.
It would be so discouraging.
Exactly. And even if you're incredibly driven, it's an uphill battle.
Like trying to climb a mountain with a backpack full of rocks.
The podcast actually talked about this young man who worked super hard, went to college, got his degree,
Wow.
but then he couldn't find a decent job.
Why not?
He didn't have the right connections, and there was this unspoken bias against people from his background.
Oh, that's awful.
It is, and that's where reliable transportation becomes so crucial.
Okay.
If you can't get to a job interview, a doctor's appointment, or even to school reliably.
It's almost impossible to improve your situation.
Exactly. It's like being stuck in a small town with no way out.
And isn't it ironic that poverty makes owning a car so much harder?
Totally. It's another catch-22. You need a car to work, but you need work to afford a car.
Precisely so, people are forced to rely on public transportation, which can be really unreliable and expensive.
Yeah, especially if you have to transfer multiple times or travel long distances.
Exactly. And the podcast even mentioned how hard it can be just to get to a grocery store.
So then you end up at convenience stores where everything's overpriced,
Or eating fast food, which isn't healthy.
which leads to more health problems.
Exactly.
doesn't it?
It's this chain reaction, and then you've got government assistance and community resources.
But even those can be hard to access, right?
Totally. Hopeton described it as this maze filled with roadblocks.
Oh, yeah.
You got to fill out tons of paperwork, meet all these requirements. It's exhausting and demoralizing.
Like they're trying to make it as difficult as possible.
And yet, despite all of this, the podcast talked about the resilience of people living in poverty.
It's amazing how resourceful they are, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They find ways to make ends meet, support their families, and even find joy in the struggle.
It's inspiring,
Mm-hmm.
but it also shows how badly we need to fix the system.
Right.
It's not about blaming individuals.
It's about recognizing that the system itself is broken.
Exactly.
And that's why understanding these 15 rules is so important.
I see what you mean.
It's not about pity. It's about opening our eyes to the reality of poverty.
And empowering people to break free.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it for today.
Yeah.
But for all you listeners out there, really think about this. What can you do to help create a more just world where poverty isn't a life sentence?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.